Hello and welcome to M142, Deploy the Division. Look at the pictures on your screen. Have you participated in any of these activities? You are probably already familiar with many of the terms and processes related to deploying a unit. We'll explore some of these things in greater detail and examine the roles and responsibilities of various elements involved in the deployment process. This briefing is focused on the first 4 bullets you see on your screen. Your assigned group readings and the discussion that follows should cover the remaining bullets. This slide depicts the joint deployment process, which consists of 4 main stages. Pre-deployment activities. This stage involves the preparation for deployment, including planning, briefings, and ensuring personnel and equipment are ready for transit. Fort to port. This stage encompasses the movement of troops and equipment from a military installation or fort to a seaport or aerial port of embarkation. This involves organizing and packing the necessary resources and coordinating transportation to the port. Port to port. This stage covers the actual transportation of troops and equipment from the port of embarkation to the port of debarkation, which could be either by sea or air. This involves the strategic lift capability of the military to move forces across the globe. Port to foxhole, or RSOI. Here begin reception, staging, onward movement, and integration of forces into the operational area. This final stage includes the unloading at the destination port, preparing and organizing troops and equipment, and moving them to their final destination or into combat operations. These stages are essential for logistics planning and movement of military forces, ensuring that they arrive at their destination ready to carry out their missions. There are subtle distinctions between joint and Army deployment doctrines. Joint doctrine adopts a unified approach, fusing planning with pre-deployment as a single phase. In contrast, the Army breaks down the movement phase into 2 distinct parts, fort to port and port to port. Noting this exception, we can observe that the terminology used to describe the Army deployment phases is in sync with the joint process. The joint process includes a planning phase at the outset, whereas the Army considers planning to be woven through all the phases. Deployment planning informs all subsequent actions. We'll explore the different steps of this phase a little bit later. Pre-deployment activities may include additional training, soldier readiness processing, or SRP, and the validation of movement requirements. These activities set the stage for the movement phase, where units advance from their bases to air or seaports of debarkation. These movements are orchestrated by U.S. Transcom, which ensures a seamless transition between home and overseas engagements. And of course, RSOI is the 4th phase of this process, which is consistent again with the joint model. Force packaging is a way for commanders to incrementally build capability in each of the warfighting functions depending on the mission requirements, capabilities existing in theater, and assets available to move. When planning during crisis, the supported commander may identify force requirements as operational capabilities in the form of force packages to facilitate sourcing. A force package is a grouping of force capabilities found in various forces that the supported commander requires to conduct the mission described in the CONOPS. The supported commander typically describes required force requirements through broad capability descriptions or unit type codes, UTCs, depending on the circumstances. The supported commander submits the required force packages through the Joint Staff to the services for sourcing. Joint and Army doctrine provide guidance on the considerations that commanders and deployment planners must make when packaging forces. Incremental capabilities. Forces must be packaged to arrive in increments that match the operational plan, ensuring that essential capabilities are available when needed to support the mission's phases. JRSOI support. Packaging must account for the support available at joint reception staging, onward movement, and integration nodes in the theater, such as equipment assembly areas and personnel processing facilities. Strategic lift assets. Consideration of the physical capabilities and limitations of available strategic lift assets is critical. This includes the cargo hold dimensions of aircraft, weight capacity of ships, and any handling equipment limitations. Equipment list accuracy. Organizational equipment lists, OELs, and unit deployment lists, UDLs, must be meticulously accurate to ensure that all unit equipment has been accounted for and that the packaging aligns with transportation plans. Is not unlike planning for any other mission. Some of the key mission analysis outputs that affect deployment are the operational approach, initial staff estimates, initial force identification, initial risk assessment, the commander's critical information requirements, or CCIRs, and the identification of tasks, limitations, and assumptions. In Army doctrine, this also includes the development of various courses of action, or COAs. Structuring forces is essentially the beginning of force packaging. COAs developed earlier outline the ways and the means to accomplish the mission. Initially, required capabilities are identified, but as the COAs are further defined, the requirements are translated into type units. The development of the TIPFID begins as forces are identified. The supported combatant commander defines the intent for deployment. This may be specific and direct. This may be very specific and direct the sequence of units, or it may just identify a general deployment timeline. In any case, the intent should clearly express how the deployment postures the force for employment. Prepare the force. In this step, force packages are developed and refined to ensure that the right capabilities are in the proper combinations to meet the intentions of the supported combatant commander. The supporting combatant commands must clearly and completely define their mobility requirements and milestones based on the concept of operations. The right sequencing of forces will give the commander the capabilities needed to achieve the desired objectives. Once the strategic lift schedule is put into motion, it is difficult to change without losing use of the transportation capacity. Expeditionary Army requires that units are prepared for potential deployments consistently with the regionally aligned readiness and modernization model, also called REARM, which provides windows of time when a unit would be available for training, modernizing, and missions. During pre-deployment, units constantly plan for contingencies and hone their deployment skills. Pre-deployment activities may vary depending on the mission and resources available. The following is a laundry list of activities and tasks that a unit must typically complete for overseas movement. Take a moment to review some of these points. Army doctrine emphasizes that movement requirements developed during deployment planning must be validated before deployment execution. Validation confirms movement requirement needs, shipment configuration, dimensions, and routing, and ensures that all parties, including the chain of command, know the requirement. Movement requirements are validated during execution planning by the supported GCC, who validates all Joint Force movement requirements for U.S. Transcom movement scheduling. Consider the questions on the left side of this slide. Your personal experiences may vary, but you've likely considered or observed the actions of deploying units and those assigned to support these units. The receipt of the Air Mobility Command, or AMC, Air Tasking Order, and Military Service Deployment and Distribution Command, SDDC, Port Call Order, authorizes the unit to move to the port of embarkation and specifies the dates on which units must arrive at the POE. The diagram on your right is intended to depict the flow of unit personnel and equipment at the installation level. Every Army installation is different, so don't get stuck thinking about this model as the ground truth. It is simply a construct to help you understand the general steps involved. Continuing on, unit movement data, UMD, is verified at the installation staging areas, and equipment is inspected and configured for movement. Unit equipment is then typically moved to the ports of embarkation by convoy or commercial surface transport. The deployment process typically commences when the division receives an execute order. This order, along with supplementary instructions, is relayed to subordinate commands, deploying units, and installations involved. Subsequently, SDDC disseminates a port call message specifying the deadline for units to deliver their equipment to the port of embarkation to coincide with the set available to load date. This message or the operations directive for sealift often includes specifics on vehicle reduction and preparation. AMC logs details regarding the aerial port of embarkation, or APOE, in a similar fashion, and the associated air movement timetables are placed by AMC into GTN, the Global Transportation Network. This schedule can also be found in the Joint Operations Planning and Execution System, or JOPS. Organizations utilize these timetables and port call directives to plan, in reverse sequence, the transit to the POEs. Each military installation is paired with a strategic aerial or seaport, and the proximity of these ports to the installation informs the mode of transportation, as well as the quantity and type of assets required for the journey. When the APOE or the seaport of embarkation is nearby, units can often utilize their own equipment and conduct convoys. However, if the APOE or seaport is further away, reliance on commercial road or rail transportation becomes necessary to facilitate movement to the port. The installation and reserve component equivalent support staff assist the deploying force by using non-deploying units, installation resources, or contracted support. Support may include load teams, materials handling equipment, MHE, maintenance teams, arrival departure airfield control groups, ADAGs, and deployment support teams. The deploying unit from different elements at the seaport. The Port Support Activity, or PSA, may include various personnel such as drivers, hazmat certified members, mechanics, and individuals who can pack and unpack containers. In CONUS, installations provide logistic support to units in transit, separate from the PSA, which operates at the seaport staging area. When marshalling areas are unused, units go straight to the port staging area. In an established OCONUS theater, an Area Support Group, or ASG, may offer PSA and logistics backing. Otherwise, the ASG supports logistics and deploying forces assist with port operations. Supercargoes, appointed by unit orders, oversee and maintain cargo on ships, acting as liaisons during loading and unloading operations and ensuring port clearance. The Military Sealift Command ultimately decides the number of supercargoes based on ship capacity, while commanders suggest the team based on cargo needs. The United States Coast Guard is empowered with broad statutory authorities to ensure the safety and security of U.S. ports and coastal areas, and employs its legal authorities to provide waterside security for military outload operations in U.S. seaports of embarkation. The Port Authority it's a government entity. The role of the Port Authority in operations can vary from port to port. Port authorities, be they state, local, or federal, are responsible for operating or providing for cargo handling equipment, cranes, storage areas, and labor. Port authorities are typically not involved directly in military operations. Rather, STDC coordinates with the Port Authority and provides a transportation battalion designed to conduct surface deployment, distribution, and water terminal port operations. The Transportation Battalion plans, establishes, and conducts port operations, including cargo reception, staging, load planning, vessel load, and vessel discharge operations. The Terminal Battalion also commands terminal management teams engaged in managing contract operations at a seaport, whether it's for embarkation or debarkation. Air movement preparation is a mission directive and spans through planning to execution. This involves a joint planning conference for coordination and clarity on responsibilities. An initial conference follows the air movement order, with a final one just before the move, attended by decision-making personnel from all elements. Continuous coordination is essential between deploying unit, the DAG, the Departure Airfield Control Group, and the Contingency Response Element, or CRE, an Air Mobility Command unit managing airfield operations. Here, planning updates are shared and issues are flagged. The APOE serves as the transition for Army units deploying by air, and comprising marshalling, alert holding, call forward, and loading ramp areas. Army and Air Force personnel collaborate on processing, inspecting, documenting, and loading, with the Army trained to perform some of the Air Force duties when needed. The DAG and CRE, their roles are detailed in Appendix G of ATP 3-35. TRANSCOM operates through three subordinate commands: the Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, SDDC, Military Sea Lift Command, MSC, and Air Mobility Command, AMC. Together, these commands enable rapid response to various contingencies. TRANSCOM manages the Defense Transportation System, offering strategic transportation for the Geographic Combatant Command to support deployment operations. The port-to-port phase of deployment commences with the departure of strategic lift assets from ports of embarkation and concludes upon their arrival at theater ports of debarkation. A crucial factor for successful port-to-port movement is the GCC's ability to orchestrate the synchronized arrival of air and sea transport, ensuring vessels can dock or be offloaded quickly. This synchronization is key to facilitating the prompt reception and processing of cargo at the destination ports. The reception staging, onward movement, and integration process delivers combat power to the Joint Force Commander, ensuring rapid deployment capabilities. To seize the initiative, quick processing of personnel and equipment is critical, necessitating ready facilities at or near the port of debarkation for personnel reception, equipment staging, and preparation, including refueling. A key necessity at the aerial port of debarkation is sufficient parking and operational spaces to support the aircraft volume required for the expected throughput. Effective RSO&I processes involve promptly matching personnel with their equipment, reducing staging and sustainment needs at the ports of debarkation, and facilitating swift onward movement. A clear, well-rehearsed plan for integration that ensures the continued maintenance of combat readiness is essential and must be ready for immediate execution upon arrival. This diagram illustrates the deployment process, detailing how troops and equipment move from their home installation to their final tactical destination. Most of what we went over in the previous slides is captured here, along with a few additional details. The process depicted in the diagram is broken down into several key phases. Pre-deployment activities, that's, of course, when units prepare for deployment at their home installations with the support of the Installation Transportation Office. Fort to port, which is movement from the home installation to the seaport or aerial port of embarkation through road or rail. Port to port, this is strategic movement, either by airlift or sea lift, from the embarkation port to the debarkation port. This phase includes pre-positioning assets both ashore and afloat. Joint reception staging, onward movement, and integration, JRSOI. Once in theater, units go through reception staging, preparing for onward movement to their destination. This phase is managed by the combatant commander and includes the integration into the operational area. Some key dates and terminologies are highlighted as follows. So you have the required load date, the RLD, and this is when equipment must leave the home station. Likewise, the ALD is when equipment must be at the port of embarkation. The EAD, the earliest arrival date, this is the earliest date that equipment can arrive at the port of debarkation. The LAD, or the latest arrival date, this is the latest date that personnel and equipment should arrive at the port of debarkation. And then there's the required delivery date, the RDD, the date units must be at their final destination. This structured framework here ensures efficient and orderly deployment of military forces involving coordination between different military branches and commands, including TRANSCOM and various service components. Okay, this has been an overview of M142, Deploy the Division. Don't forget that this is simply an overview and not a substitute for a thorough examination of Joint and Army doctrine as found in JP 3-35 and ATP 3-35, respectively. Thanks.